So it's really wonderful to be here in Shenzhen and see all that's going on around the electronics industry. Do you see more companies coming here to start up?
Oh yeah. Oh Jesus. It's like there's like an incubator, like coming, starting every other day. Like, I feel like everyone and the grandma is starting a hardware accelerator out here. So.
Sure. And so, what do you think some of the benefits are to doing that here?
I think there's like the benefit to, I guess, actually, so having an accelerator out here is I think good, but the main benefit really is kind of contacts and like guidance on the manufacturing process, because actually I feel like Shenzhen, or more properly Dongguan, is the manufacturing, the manufacturing, the factory of the world almost. So almost everything gets manufactured in this area, the Pearl River Delta. And so like a lot of people are coming here, and they're, because there's like all this talk about Shenzhen, and then they come here, and then they're like, okay, now what do I do? And then basically they just go to the Huaqiangbei markets. And the components there are really cheap, and you can source them. But there's also another layer, which is like dealing with the manufacturers and the factories. And so that's when things get kind of more difficult. So like a lot of people, maybe they just come off a successful Kickstarter. They come out here, and then they generally need a lot of help. So actually, I think a lot of the accelerators around here, I feel like they're kind of grooming people to do a proper Kickstarter, which means that they're not really kind of focused on manufacturing so much.
Sure.
Like once you get into manufacturing, then I think you need to start talking to factories, and you probably need to find people you trust, like a contract manufacturer that can like kind of integrate all the factories and help you build up the connections. Like so, but normally I think if you want to make something out here, so like you have a design you want made, and so probably you would need to come up with like say the enclosure design files, like in a parametric modeler like SolidWorks. And then you'd have to start talking to plastic injection molding companies to get the tooling started. And then and there's going to be a lot of back and forth. And along with that, then you have to start talking to the PCB house, and then like getting like kind of hobby PCB made is much different than getting like kind of a professional PCB made, because there's so many other things that you have to start thinking about, like because you need to start thinking about production issues and quality and reliability, and like even whether or not you want to put solder mask over your vias or not will make a difference on your reliability. So, and then the PCB manufacturers will ask you those questions, like, do you want tinted vias? Do you want tinted on one side? Do you want tinted on both sides? Do you want your vias plugged? You just like very like tiny details. And then you have to coordinate all of that, and then along with that, then you have to start like kind of sourcing all the parts, getting ready for PCB assembly, make sure all the plastic injection molding is going okay, and then start building up the logistics and how to get it out to wherever you want. So then like this whole like line of things, and that's called like that's called the manufacturing and supply chain, and then that's the area that people come out here to try and learn, but it actually takes a long time.
Maker Camp started a week before Maker Faire, and the idea was to bring 20 people from all over China to learn how to transform a container into a makerspace, and then actually use it to prototype projects and involve the local community.
And what kind of projects were they prototyping during the week?
They've done a lot of different projects. They had a project where they were monitoring air pollution, because that's a big problem in China. They also had like fun projects, like they transformed the container into a dating game. So they wanted the container to make sounds when people come and touch it at the same time.
Do you find the problem with forming these communities and showing this way of teaching and learning is there isn't a space for people to congregate at? Or is that really more of a mechanism to get the community to coagulate around something?
It's more of a mechanism. I personally think that it's not about the space, it's about the people. A lot of times, if the people build the space and they take ownership and they get to express themselves and what they want to build in the way they organize the space, That creates a very different culture. It gives them agency, and they take ownership over the project, and that's the goal. It wouldn't matter if we do a house tree or a container, but containers are easier to find.
Well, I think that brings up an interesting question. We have such a big social difference with the maker and hacker community. In China, I think the previous run of Maker Camp was in Europe.
Yes.
What are some of the differences that surprised you between the two groups?
Oh my God, there are so many. I think in the camp in Berlin we had more time. We had 1 month.
Really? Okay.
Yes, and the participants were a bit younger as well, and we all spoke the same language, which made a big difference. However, the easiest thing in Berlin was that we could just walk on the street and find pallets and wood, and we made a poster saying, if you have tools that you don't use, please bring it to us. And people actually brought us tools. We managed to build everything with zero budget in Berlin. That wasn't possible here, because even if we found bamboo on the street, someone else would take it. Like, nothing is for free in China. I think it's really hard to find materials, reuse, upcycle. And that was like one of the things I didn't expect at all. And I think also like the biggest cultural difference is the difference between being used to receive guidance and instructions and follow a guide compared to what we did in Berlin, where it was, okay, we have this container, there's a box, let's make a plan, who wants to do this, and they self-organized. And the idea of the camp was that they would self-organize.
Sure.
They managed to do that here as well after like the initial 3 days, but it was a process to get them to understand that no one will tell them what to do.
So it sounds like you don't need to go through an accelerator to have access to that, but it's a bigger mountain to climb.
I think, yeah, you don't need to go through an accelerator for that. Like, an accelerator, I think, would probably be good to give you money, maybe some tools, and some, I think accelerator is really good to groom people with an idea and maybe a functional prototype into a successful, like, Kickstarter campaign. So they really work on like, the pitch and, like, you know, a lot of, like, and presentation and the video and all that. And but for the factory advice, I think talking to the Kickstarter alumni is probably the most, like, one of their most important. The Hackcelerator alumni is their most important asset, actually, because they've gone through the whole manufacturing process. And then right now, Bunny and I were teaching the MIT Media Lab manufacturing program, summer program, which is like a 6-week course on how to get things manufactured, and we're taking them to the factories and having them actually manufacture plastic injection molding tooling, professional PCBs, you know, and just going through that whole process, because we think that as designers, it's important to keep the manufacturing like in your head as you design, rather than as an afterthought when you finish the design.
So are you actually able to carry through the entire process in 6 weeks, or do you kind of take some shortcuts?
We did like there were a lot of shortcuts that were made. So Bunny had actually prepared all the tooling in advance, and so like when they submit their tooling, they start with the base file, and they're just going to have one area modified. Okay. And so a lot of that will just be like, you know, like part of like the tooling will just be remachined and like a little piece shaven off. So then it can be done in like just a couple days. Whereas generally, if you do injection molding tooling, I think it's around a 2 to 3 month lead time in order to get like the steel machined and then put into the mold frame.
So it sounds like proximity is one of the things that being in Shenzhen and starting up is really good. Are there any things that are harder if you're here?
Yeah, like if you don't speak Chinese, you probably need to start hanging out with a translator or something. Most factories like can speak. They have somebody that speaks Chinese that they'll do translation, but also you might want to have someone that you trust, kind of like going along with you and like kind of to ease like the conversation, especially when you talk about detailed specifications. And like if you go to the markets, then you'll need somebody to like. You might need somebody to translate for you. Actually, you can just pretty much point, and and write down a price on a calculator, and then, you know.
Looks like for companies to get started in Hong Kong, and maybe what advantages people might find by working here.
Yeah, well, Hong Kong is really, I think everyone knows, it's the most free environment for business, generally speaking. So it's very easy to set up a company. It takes really a couple of hours if you have an e-certificate of yourself. Otherwise, it's a question of a week. All this done. Now it's getting a bit more complicated. Open a bank account. They check where you're from and whatever. Everyone can imagine with the restriction control on money laundering issues that happened recently or whatever. So the system is checking a bit more, but it's still a question of days. And for what about the real setup? I mean, regardless the paperwork, starting up in here is quite easy. There are several incubators programs that help young people to kick off. I have to say honestly, there are difficulties at the financial stage immediately after the seeding finance. So whatever is after incubator is kind of difficult to find money for that stage in here because investors are still quite traditional. I mean, those investors that usually look at the company that is not seed and no VC stage in
Sure.
there are parents or small investors, people of the circle you choose to work in, like education, and then you have a startup in education and you look for some people with money in that field, or you start up in IT and you look around in the field of the IT, and that kind of investor is still a bit difficult in here to be found. But there are people coming from the States and from Singapore, so you need to be actually in the loop of these co-working spaces or events arranged by Science Park and Cyberport, and you can find stuff. And after that, again, it's still very traditional from my point of view. As I told you before, I'm a kind of finance guy, so I know what I'm talking about. And I can see here people love to invest in the stock market or big companies, or if they invest in something directly as a family, let's say a couple of million of Hong Kong dollar in something, they want to overtake the whole control of the thing. So it doesn't really match the mind settings of an entrepreneur at that stage immediately after the seed. It's a bit difficult.
Do you think that that's going to change this?
It's changing,
Okay.
but I honestly can say I've been here for a while. This is really hard to be changed in the mind of the local people. I can see a change may be brought by people coming from outside that want to fill in this gap.
Once you do find a factory that you want to work with, what's it like to build a relationship with them?
So I think that's probably the most important part of being out here. So the general rule of thumb, and I think it's what Bunny's actual philosophy is that if you can't drink with the boss, like if you can't hang out with the boss, then that factory is probably not right for you, because like there's so many when you're in mass production, or actually when you're going into production also, there's so many problems that can happen and that will happen, and sometimes you'll need to be able to get things done quickly, and you need to have access to the boss, the factory boss, in order to get that pushed through. And so you'll need a good relationship with the factory boss, and that means like kind of hanging out. There's a lot of people talk about the drinking that goes on here. A lot of that is just to show face, and also just to build up more trust and a relationship with people, including the people you manufacture with. 2.5 years ago, Bunny and I were like kind of drunk at a bar in Japan, and he's like, it'd be cool if we just like spent a whole month doing factory tours for like for students to teach them, because they don't understand like what manufacturing is all about. There's a lot of designers in the world that don't understand manufacturing, and then I was like, that'd be cool. I'd want to do that too. And then I totally forgot about it. But like 6 months later, Bunny's like, hey, I set up that tour. Do you want to come? And then, so that was about 2 years ago, and that was the first Shenzhen, the Media Lab Shenzhen tour. And out of that, actually, probably the biggest success was Bunny and Jiqi started working on circuit stickers, and then that turned into like kind of a company that and G became exposed to all of the whole manufacturing chain, and she was originally so like young and innocent, and then now she's like, oh, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. Like, you need to call this person and have them talk to this boss. And it's like it was very interesting to see that.
Hardware companies, are there challenges or benefits to starting them in China?
Well, obviously, if you start them from Shenzhen, you have access to an incredible supply chain, and so we were able to price this new Genuino Uno incredibly aggressively because here the supply chain, it's you literally walk down the street and you get every single thing you need: parts, assembly people, test people. So you have everything locally, and so I think this is very important. And clearly, if you want to build hardware, this is one of the places where you want to be. Also because the image that people have about China as in like a factory in the middle of nowhere where people sleep on the floor, I don't think that's Shenzhen.
Yeah.
Shenzhen is about people with qualification, people who are engineers who do very good quality. This is the first Arduino, so Genuino that came out of the factory here. It is very good quality. So I think it's about turning the made in China into proudly made in China. This is for the Chinese market.
So what are your feelings on engineering in China? If people are here starting companies, can they find talent to help them get past the problems in their design and manufacture process?
So what I can see right now is that in Shenzhen they can find everything about hardware. They can find it here. Good engineers, good manufacturing, everything. They can find everything here. I've been told that they can find less people that know about software, but I think that's changing because Tencent is one of the buildings around here, and they have this WeChat with hundreds of millions of users, so the software is coming. And what I think we need now is to work with them on the more creative side. I think the government here is really pushing on making makers something that people understand about, because it's one of the ways you can create the creative companies, the one that invent the product here.
Yeah.
Instead of just somebody comes here and manufactures here. So you will be able to find designers and other creative people here in the next few years.
In Hong Kong, there's a lot of high-tech places, and that's one reason I came back from Vancouver to Hong Kong for work. Science Park, Cyberport, and some other places for makers. Mm-hmm. So if people like to come to Hong Kong, first things visit us, Dim Sum Lab, and we will tell you more about what kind of place you can stay, and then how to make stuff. And especially it's good to make prototype, because we're in Hong Kong, so if you want to make a PCB, all you need is a schematic, a BOM, and that's it. And people can actually help you to order parts to make the PCB, solder them together, and give you back. So no hassle, it's easy.
So that's what the Cyber Park is? They have...
No, it's... Actually, I do the part-time job. But in Cyberport, it's for a place for rental. Okay. Like for people, they want to get a place to work on this stuff. Okay. So yeah, Cyberport and Science Park is supported by government.
Okay.
So yeah. It's cheap for the first year.
And what kind of size? I mean, how many of these different small companies are in Cyberport?
A lot.
Yeah.
I guess about more than 100.
Okay.
Yeah, Cyberport and Science Park. Yeah. If you have time, go visit Science Park. It's a nice place. Yeah. High tech. It look high tech. Yeah. I don't know what people is doing inside, but people go in. At least they have a place to work on, and then they get sponsorship for marketing and sales, and a lot of sponsorship in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you notice companies starting locally rather than people moving here to start a company? Is there a growing movement for local?
Local company. There's 3D display. There's company doing the 3D displays. A company working on oil spill, protect the ocean from oil spill. Some people working on humanoid robot for hobbyists, and some people working on two wheels wheelchair for disabled. So there's a lot of things going on in Hong Kong, but I guess it's the media. They don't get much. They don't get much attention from the public. So I guess it's the awareness in Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong people like to make money instead of make stuff. But you never know. Like the culture will change sometimes. Yeah.
So how rapidly changing is this? Like, if you learn I need to go through this process, is it going to be relevant a month, a year, 5 years from now?
I think like the tooling and the manufacturing technology might change, but I think but like when you manufacture, the main difficulty is probably the human issues, like dealing with humans and dealing with people. And so I feel like that's kind of, that's like a big part of the education, is to have the students see how we work with the bosses, how we drink with the bosses, and also like kind of, and see how, and we don't force any of the students to drink. They eat with us. But if they want to like hang out, then that's fine too.
So I get the impression that China has a very rapidly evolving culture right now. Does that make the years that you've been coming to Shenzhen, do you feel a big change in culture?
I feel like Shenzhen is changing. Shenzhen is becoming like they're trying to rapidly evolve it and then show a lot of like these beautiful buildings and like kind of very industrial thing. But I feel like underneath all that, so that I feel like is kind of like the glazed coating, like the paint. And then if you look underneath that paint, then you still see like the hard, gritty things like the Huaqiangbei components markets and all the factories out in Dongguan. And all of that stuff is really what this place is all about. And that's what keeps everything going.
It's interesting. We did go to the markets the other day, and there's like one brand new building. But when you walk in, you get the feeling that the building was like built around this existing set of booths. Is that?
Yeah. And then actually the Huaqiangbei markets are very dynamic. But it's like so like in this area, it's all these beautiful buildings, but I just can't really understand it because it's so far away from where everything is really happening. And you go, and then like in Huaqiangbei, they do have buildings coming up, but then they all end up, no matter how beautiful they are on the outside, you go inside and it's just a bunch of people smoking and like babies like kind of crawling around and people throwing stuff on the floor and just a lot of money changing hands very fast.
So the sound of packing tape is pervasive through there. I'm wondering if this is something that has kind of come on like a freight train because the internet is opening up options, or has it always been like this?
I think it's always been like that. So like there's one area which is just, so they're all, most of the packing tape you're hearing is because they're shipping, because actually Taobao is getting bigger, and so like they have like a lot of the independent shippers, and so they're like packing things up. But at the same time they've always been like Shenzhen is a trade city, and so there's always been kind of like an export economy here, and so a lot of people source their parts and just have them shipped out. But that being said, there's actually, what's really changing is the shipping technologies. So now there's like some places where like if you're doing maybe like a parts shop out here, then or like Ian doing dirty PCBs, then like he gets a lot of customers all over the world, and basically he just has like a label printer, prints all the PCB, prints labels for all the boxes, and then he takes them to shipping logistics provider, and then they just ship by weight. So they just weigh it and then take it all, and then they just like sort it out and ship it to wherever country it needs to go. And so there's no like kind of thought about this individual tracking number, all this stuff. It's just like boom, here it is, weighs this much, you pay this much, and then sort it.
I think the most important things that you can find here, if you are coming from the US, like or from Europe. Well, if you come from the US, here is cheaper to start up. Valet is very expensive. We have people in here, they are thinking to step into the valet after they start up in here, and it's still expensive.
Yeah.
They do it because they know that in there is easier to find investors.
Sure.
They can fulfill that gap that in here cannot be fulfilled because there are no people willing to go, as I said, from the seed to that.
Yeah, so here it's more traditional.
Pretty big
it's a little
round.
bit easier
Yeah.
to get the funding.
And for whatever, yes, at the second stage, but you
Yeah.
can start up in here where it's easier and cheaper.
Sure. So do you see a lot of companies doing that? Like they start right here, and then as soon as they get to that next level, they move because they have to.
Not a lot of companies are doing that, but it's a kind of common strategy
Okay.
to think about doing so. And is, as I said, it's still expensive to do it in the US, so not everyone can do it because they can't raise the money they need to do that, take that step. For European people willing to start up is even better because in Europe, actually, they do a lot of talking about startupping or whatever, but they do it, governments, institutions, or whatever, because they don't know how to offer a job. There are no jobs in there. So the only thing they can fit the guys with is, you need to start up, it's cool to start up or whatever. But no funding are working. Probably in the UK, I don't know. I don't have direct experience, but I ran away long ago, so I can say, and I have my brother running a good business in there, and for him it's every day a trouble. Even though he is running the company of the family, it's like 50 years of history, still tough. So you can imagine for a guy that get out of the university have an idea, or based on an algorithm and some theory, put together friends, want to build up an app, they need 10,000 euro, they can't really find it anywhere.
Yeah.
So if they come over here, well, with a good idea, you can easily get that money. And let's say up to 5,000 euro, talking in European way, or 500,000 Hong Kong dollar, more or less, let's say, is not that difficult to find in here, to start up. If you go into an incubation program, you work hard, and you bring some, you achieve the targets you put yourself, and you fulfill what you put in the business plan, that it can be done.
Pretty easy to get to the point where you can read and understand the schematics, but then to get a pool of schematics that everyone can look at and
Exactly.
use is the choke point, right?
Exactly. And that's what they have here. They call it the Shanzai PCBs. Like all the people in Huaqiang Bay, they share the schematics. That's why you see so many innovative copycats, and like all the boards are somehow similar because they use the same schematics and then they adapt it a little bit, they add something. And I think the barrier between copy and something new becomes very blurred. And that will also happen if we manage to create new sustainable models, like new business models that are not based on copyright.
I think one of the things that's a little bit difficult here is open hardware. Like, is it possible to start an open hardware company in China and develop a market for it in China?
I think by default, China is already open. And then it's like involuntarily open. So like trade secrets don't really mean that much here. People will just take your designs and reverse engineer them, and then like generate the schematics off of them. Like and like patents don't really mean anything. So like actually if you work with, like, say you take a lot of time to build this beautiful enclosure, then like there's so many injection molding houses, they'll just take it apart, just take some calipers, start measuring it, and they'll just come up with a SolidWorks file, like on the fly. And they do so much work with like SolidWorks and plastics that they can just like reverse engineer enclosures just really quickly, as well, and electronics very quickly too.
So if you know that's going to happen, how do you build a business around the design?
I think like I don't like how do you
Undetermined?
no I'm actually like I'm just trying to think like because how do you build a business around open hardware because like so if it's voluntarily open then how do you build a business and so like you how do you capture the value like I think it's a lot of it is like what China doesn't do well is building communities abroad. So I feel like like a lot of the open hardware businesses, it's not really that they sell like unique components. Is that they built such a interesting community. Like Adafruit has just a huge community that they've worked so hard that Lamore and Phil have worked so hard to build up that I think that's really kind of their business power that's driving their business. I think, and so that's I feel like the product is just a tiny part, and there's support and community instruction, like things like that. That all I believe really sells.
So is there the potential to do that in China to build a really dedicated community, or has someone already been doing that?
I think they already have I think they already have like a very strong kind of hardware community in China. Like China is a manufacturing country, so so in fact I feel like China's manufacturing and hardware skills far outweigh their kind of software development skills. So for open hardware, I think they're still kind of getting used to the idea like that it's voluntarily open, and so a lot of places would be like kind of they still like trying like don't take pictures of this or.
Universities are pushing more guys to be think about an entrepreneurial idea rather than find a job in a big firm.
Yeah.
Because the mind settings of the guy also here is a trouble. Let's say trouble because they study pushed by the family to find a job in a big firm. This is the general way Hong Kongese work. I mean, deal with their future. I study hard and I get into a big corporation. I study hard IT and I get into Microsoft, Cisco, whatever. Study finance, I get into banks or management consulting firm, whatever. So this is actually the mind setting. So tell them, okay, no big firm. Set up something by yourself or with few friends. Sometimes the family oppose this idea.
Okay.
And then I always say there is another issue in here that Asian people have troubles in facing failures and losing face, and this is really, really a very strong stop sign because you find really you can't do it inside yourself. You don't want people know that you invest you yourself first. I mean, your efforts, your power, your energy in something that didn't work.
Yeah. How do people get over that? How do you overcome that cultural norm of like failure is horrible, failure is bad?
Well, on my point of view, it's easier if you did good a couple of times, then you are on an interview or on a stage and you're a successful businessman, and then you can say, well, yeah, but I also did fail, guys.
Yeah.
But it's something that is very difficult for them actually to overcome. It's extremely difficult because they also don't have example. If you fail, you are out of the market, let's say. So the first example a kid has probably is his father, and the kid grown up looking at the father as an idol of perfection in here. So it never fail, I can't fail. And the best way not to fail is not to get engaged in something, or get into something that is already running. So his failure can be managed. I mean, you didn't get the promotion. Well, the promotion has to come to me. It's not written, and if I fulfill a test, then I get the promotion inside the company.
Sure.
So I think it's very tough, and it's really a big issue.
Yeah.
And I think it's really very difficult to change it, because there are historical proof that this part of the world has problems in overcoming even very, very, very old situation of losing face, losing reputation, or whatever. So this is a bit a trouble. I think that the interaction between Western and locals is making things a bit more easy, because maybe we fell together and then we stand up again together.
It seems like, just from the Maker Faire, there's like so many things that I feel like a lot of it's opening up. So, the really big thing that I feel that's happening is there's a lot more hacker spaces and maker spaces popping up. So that's really interesting, and I think that will spur a lot of open hardware.
So you've been to a lot of hacker spaces and maker spaces. Is the kind of community inside of those New China spaces similar to others, or is it a unique thing?
I haven't been to a lot of hacker spaces out here. Like, the person to talk to really would be probably like Mitch Altman, I think he's just traveled to like just so many of the hacker spaces around China.
Sure.
And then and also, and there's a big government push behind the hacker spaces, which I personally, like, I don't like hacker spaces that have government sponsorship, but I think it is interesting that that's happening. So that's accelerating a lot of the growth.
When are we going to get to the point where we have enough in education that that's happening? Do you have any feeling?
It's hard to say. When I started academia 3 years ago, I thought in a year I'm gonna reach, like 1,000 schools, and I had really big plans, and now I realize how real change is incremental and takes a lot of time.
Sure.
And the more we try to rush it, the harder it becomes. So now I know I'm invested in this at least for 10 years.
Is it possible to build a hackerspace, or is that like a community of people that then has a physical space built around them?
So that's a really interesting question. So I think I'm working on my 4th or 5th hackerspace now. Like, that's the one in Dharamsala. And then when I first started doing hackerspaces, I thought it was like about, I thought it was about the space at first, and then after that, then I thought it was about the equipment, and now I finally realized that a hackerspace really is just about, the people and having interesting projects. And, you can have like almost no equipment, but if you have like the right people and interesting projects, then those will attract more people, which will do more interesting projects, and you build up a feedback loop. And so I think right now there's so much emphasis on like all these expensive tools, and like laser cutters and 3D printers and CNC machines. But I really feel like you just need a bunch of motivated people doing like really interesting things, and then you can pretty much and then that would be a successful hackerspace.
The city is so big, like it's 17 million people, and it was built in 25 years. Like 25 years ago, this was a fisherman village. So I think we can't even start to begin to understand what's going on in Shenzhen and in China, and very little people do, which is the problem. I don't know what will happen with innovation and the maker movement in China. I'm here to observe as much as I can. And I'm still trying to figure that out.
So as the people that have gone through your programs grow up and start their own companies, is this the place that they want to be to work on those things, and why?
I think this is one of the places where it's easy to start. But I think the places where they could have most impact are in the north or in the countryside. I think it would be great for them to come here, learn as much as they can, get the connections to get parts or tools delivered, but then go to the countryside or go to their province and start something there. And a lot of them want to do that, which is encouraging, because people need to have a livelihood and a connection to the place where they're living. And I don't expect everyone in China to move to this region. So I think it would be important to take that into account. And of course, there are many other political implications for displacing people and they're all affected by it, and it's visible. And when we talk about maker movement, we shouldn't forget about our attachment to the place where we come from and what we identify with, and that this maker movement was born from that connection to the local community. And I think in Shenzhen, the feeling of local community is more justified by access to technology or access to electronics, but not necessarily by a pool of common values or motivations.
Great.
I don't think you're going to get this from other people.